Hello everybody and welcome back to A Court of Words and Pages. My name is Natalie. So for today's video, it's going to be another kind of TBR type one, and I'm going to be talking about diverse fantasy books that I want to read, and these specifically are by authors of color. So I believe that it's very important to make sure we're reading fantasy books that are inspired by different cultures and written by people who have different experiences, especially by people of color, so that people can make sure we're having contact with different cultures. And especially in fantasy, a lot of fantasy tends to be influenced by mythology and lore from whatever country they're being written, and sometimes even past events. So I think that fantasy books by authors of color are especially important to read. I probably will be making a sequel video to this video, mainly trying to focus on indigenous authors and authors from the Middle East, because I think I do have a fair amount of Asian, and then I have some African-inspired fantasies on this list as well, so just making sure we're getting a wide variety of cultures in our fantasy books. So the first one specifically that's on my TBR is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I believe this book specifically is a pre-Columbian-inspired America book, and I've just heard a lot of amazing things about the writing and the fantasy story told in this, and I'm really excited to read it, so I will read you all the blurb or synopsis. A god will return when the earth and sky converge under the black sun. In the holy city of Tova, the winter solstice is usually a time for celebration and renewal, but this year it coincides with a solar eclipse, a rare celestial event prescribed by the sun priest as an unbalancing of the world. Meanwhile, a ship launches from a distant city bound for Tova and set to arrive on the solstice. The captain of the ship, Ziala, is a disgraced tech whose song can calm the waters around her as easily as it can warp a man's mind. Her ship carries one passenger. Described as harmless, the young passenger, Serapio, is a young man blind, scarred, and cloaked in destiny. As Ziala knows well, when a man is described as harmless, he usually ends up being a villain. So I think this one will be very interesting. I could have technically probably included this on my series I'm Gonna Start video that I made kind of recently. I'll link that down below if you want to watch that. But this book only has one book out in the series so far. I think it's a series, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't heard anything about the sequel, so I'm gonna actually look that up right now. I just looked it up and it appears as if this book is a series. There's no information on the sequel, but hey, I've just heard a lot of really amazing things about this book, and I think we don't really learn a lot about pre-Columbian America, so I think it'd be really important to read a book that is specifically inspired by these events, especially knowing the horrors of what Columbia did when he came over, so yeah. Next is technically a book I have started and I'm like halfway through. Possibly, I don't know, is this over halfway? I have a bookmark still in it. I'm like over halfway through this book, but I just like put it down, and that's A Song of Wraith and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. So this is a African-inspired fantasy story, I believe so, and I bought this in August and I started reading it, and then I just think at the particular time it wasn't really holding my interest, and I had some other books I wanted to read, so I put this one down, but it wasn't like a permanent DNF. This is like a one I want to get back to, especially because I've also heard some really amazing things about it. I felt like I wasn't giving it my full time and attention, and I wanted to do so I decided I'll put this down later. I don't think I meant to take this long of a break from it, because I'm probably gonna have to restart this one. But I also think I maybe put it down a bit because I wasn't as engaged. I was hoping, because I heard a lot of really amazing things about this when it came out. But I still totally believe that this book could be amazing. I think the one thing I was kind of disappointed is we were over halfway percent through this book, and this book is kind of pitched as an enemies to lovers romance, and I don't even think the characters had met, or they had like just met, and I felt like the romance part was lacking because the characters hadn't met yet, so there could be no romance, and I felt betrayed by that, basically. Basically, we follow our main characters, Malik, whose sister Nadia is abducted as they are entering this city that they've been traveling to. He strikes a deal where he has to kill the Corinna, who is the crown princess of Empire, basically for his sister's freedom. But Corinna, who's the princess, her mother has just been assassinated, and she decides that she's going to resurrect her mother. But to do the spell that she's going to use, she needs the beating heart of a king, and she's going to offer her hand in marriage to the victor of this Solsticia competition, which is like about to happen in the city, and Malik is going to be fighting in this contest. They're going to meet, and they both need each other for different personal gains that benefit that they need to kill each other to succeed, but they're probably gonna fall in love. So I think I'm excited to read this. It's African inspired. I do remember from what I read of that was a very prominent part of it. And I was really enjoying that. A lot of folklore and lore from it, mythology. I was really enjoying it. Like, one of the main characters is like a demon that like comes from stories, and I was enjoying it, and I really need to get back to reading it. I'm gonna have to start over there. Hopefully I'll get to this one soon. Next up is yet another book that I've just heard really good things about. So I was like, oh, I'll read it, and I bought a copy of it. I think I need to stop doing this because then I just pile up books. I think it's a problem. And that is Legendborn, which is by Tracy Deonn. So I don't believe this one in particular is inspired by anything like... Actually, this is Arthurian, but it's written by Tracy Deonn, who is not white. So, and as we can see on the cover, it has a black main character. So that'll be good to read too. So in this book, I believe we follow Bree, whose mother has just been killed, and so she goes to this like pre-college programming thing at UNC Chapel Hill. And on her first night at the campus, she sees this like magical attack, and she learns about this secret society called Legendborn, who kind of handles the magical things that happen on this campus. And this memory of seeing this attack brings back memories from when her mother was at the hospital, and so she figures out that there's more to her mother's death than she was originally led to believe, and she recruits a person who exiled himself from the society to try to get into it, and the descendant says King Arthur's knights, and there's apparently a war coming, and it sounds interesting. I've heard so many amazing things about this book. I'm very excited. I think the King Arthur thing is going to be really interesting. I don't know if I've read any books inspired by it. Well, yes, I have read one that kind of has that aspect of it, but it wasn't like directly kind of like the main focus. I don't know a whole lot even about the like King Arthur stuff. It's just something I haven't really learned about yet. I think this one's going to be really interesting. Once again, I've heard amazing things, and it's a YA fantasy, and YA fantasies are good. So this next one isn't necessarily the first in a series. It's actually the second in a series, but it is like by an author of color, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So R.F. Kuang is Asian, I believe, and The Poppy War is specifically inspired by Chinese history and lore and stuff like that. So in The Poppy War, we follow Rin, who is a war orphan peasant girl who lives in kind of the south of her empire. She's been raised by her like adopted foster parents, and basically one day they say, hey, you're going into an arranged marriage. And Rin is like, no, I will not have this. She doesn't want that for herself, so she decides to start studying for this competition that will get her into military academies, and no one expects her to pass it. But not only does she pass it, but she gets a high enough score to go to like the best military academy in the city, where the sons of the generals and the governing people around the empire go. And so Rin goes there, but it's not exactly what she expects. She doesn't fit in. She's ostracized for being poor, for her color of the skin, which is darker than everyone else, because of the time she spent outside in the south. And there, Rin also starts to study the power of shamanism and this world and the magic system of how people can hold down the gods. And then war strikes. The Empire's greatest enemy invades them again. And Rin and her classmates have to go to war, and they're going to realize that this is nothing like what they've been trained for. But Rin also knows she has a power that could end this war. The Poppy War is just such a great book. I absolutely loved it. So specifically right now, I'm talking about the Dragon Republic and how I really want to read its sequel. But so this book really draws on history on the Chinese history, and many scenes in this book are focused on specific historical events, and it's a really good book, and it's a hard book to read. I mean, it's definitely not easy. It's grimdark fantasy. It will go there, but I really enjoyed this book, and I'm very excited to continue on with the series. Next up is one I'm a bit apprehensive about, not because I don't think it's going to be good, but because I'm afraid I'm going to be too stupid for this book, and that is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. So I feel like this is the best way to kind of explain my confusion about this book is to read you the kind of synopsis. I'm going to read it to you off of Goodreads. This is the way the world ends again. 3 terrible things happen in a single day. As soon, a woman living an ordinary life in a small town comes home to find that her husband has brutally murdered their son and kidnap their daughter. Meanwhile, mighty Sans, the world-spinning empire whose innovations have been civilized bedrock for 1,000 years, collapses as most of its citizens are murdered to serve a madman's vengeance. And worst of all, across the heart of the vast continent known as the Stillness, a great red rift has been torn into the heart of the earth, spewing ash enough to darken the sky for years, or centuries. Now Asun must pursue the wreckage of her family through a deadly dying land. Without sunlight, clean water, or arable land, and with limited stockpiles of supplies, there will be war across the Stillness, a battle royale of nations not for power or territory, but simply for the basic resources necessary to get through the long, dark night. Asun does not care if the world falls apart around her. She'll break it herself if she must to save her daughter. So basically, from what I've heard, this book basically takes place in this world where seasons happen and basically, the world ends. And there are people who can, kind of control the earth and its abilities, and then this book is specifically, there's 3 different perspectives. The lady who's mentioned in the synopsis and 2 different people. I actually started reading this book once, and then it was just going over the head, so I stopped reading it because I was like, I'm confused, and this isn't the right time to be reading, and I was trying to read it in 12 hours before my library loan was due on Libby, and it wasn't happening. But so part of the reason I'm scared to read this is because one of the perspectives is in second person, and I'm afraid that's gonna really trip me up. So I'm scared about that, and also just N.K. Jemisin, her books are just supposed to be amazing. I know this book has won the Hugo Award, and just everyone talks about how good and smart her books are, and I'm just I'm afraid this is all gonna go over my head. But they're supposed to be good, and I'm sure they're critically acclaimed for a reason, and I want to give them a shot. Finally, we have The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. So this isn't one I'm scared to read. This is one I am excited to read just because I've heard a lot of really great things. Synopsis time. Nari has never believed in magic. Certainly, she has power on the streets of 18th century Cairo. She's a con woman of unsurpassed talent. But she knows better than anyone that the trade she uses to get by, palm readings, czars, healings, are all tricks, sleights of hand, learned skills, a means to the delightful end of swindling Ottoman nobles. But when Nari accidentally summons an equally sly, darkly mysterious Jinn warrior to her side during one of her cons, she is forced to accept that the magical world she thought only existed in childhood stories is real, for the warrior tells her a new tale. Across hot, windswept sands teeming with creatures of fire and rivers where the mythical Marids sleep, past ruins of once magnificent human metropolises and mountains where the circling hawks are not what they seem, lies Daevabad, the legendary city of brass, a city to which Nari is irrevocably bound. And that city, behind the gilded brass walls laced with enchantments, behind the 6 gates of the 6 Jinn tribes, old resentments are simmering. And when Nari decides to enter this world, she learns that true power is fierce and brutal, that magic cannot shield her from the dangerous conquest of court politics, that even the cleverest of schemes can have deadly consequences. After all, there is a reason they say, be careful what you wish for. So that just sounds really good. I'm not quite sure exactly what all of this is inspired by, but I think kind of from that blurb you can tell it has some Egyptian mythology in it, some stuff about the Jinn, and then some Ottoman Empire stuff, so it'll be exciting to read. I think it'll be interesting. I've heard amazing things about this book, and yeah, I know it's a trilogy and all 3 books are out, so if I like them I can go binge them all, as long that too with the popular and the 5th season. But am I really gonna be wanting to binge that series? Because I don't think so. I think in the City of Brass we also get the perspective of Ali, who is a prince from this Daevabad, so I think it's gonna be a good time. I've heard pretty much nothing but great things about all of these books that I talked about in this video, and I'm very excited to read them all. So that's going to be it for today. Down below you will find links to all the books I talked about, as well as my Bookstagram and my Goodreads if you want to follow me there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!